I thought that this was a excellent exchange that basically supports my thoughts, and also it basically points out the faults in the thought processes and logic of white supremacists. Now, Roland is going to debate, if you want to call it that, a person from a white supremacist group. And when he begins making points, rather than dispute a lot of the points, the gentleman basically tries to move the conversation away from the point that Roland wins. He does state several things that are erroneous, and I'm going to try to point those out, but Roland does such an excellent job of countering the viewpoints of this person that I'm not really going to have to get in there a whole lot.
White supremacy.
Sorry about that. My grandson was rolling through. Here we go.
And white nationalists are excited about a Donald Trump campaign. Over the course of this election, you've seen Donald Trump retweet a number of tweets from various groups that have been highly, folks, he's been criticized for that, but it doesn't matter. Now, according to the New York Times, there's been close to a 50% increase, according to a poll conducted in April by CBS News when it comes to whites in their support of Donald Trump. Now, check this out, of course. You have a significant number of people all across the country who are saying, hey, this is a rise in white nationalism by Donald Trump running for president. My next guest, one of those folks who says Donald Trump is my man. Richard Spencer. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so folks, I want to go right to Richard's title here. Let's scroll up, please. I want to get to it. And so he's out of Montana. He joins us via Skype, and he's president of the National Policy Institute and founder of, is it Radix Journal?
Yes, Radix Journal.
So, Richard, explain this to me, why white nationalists are so excited about a Donald Trump presidency.
I don't think Donald Trump is a white nationalist. I don't think he's an identitarian. That's actually how I describe myself, and we can talk more about that later. I think what Donald Trump has done is brought an existential quality to the presidential campaign that wasn't there before. Donald Trump has asked these big questions like, are we a nation? Well, if we're a nation, we are a people. We're going to have borders. We're going to control those borders. He's talked to, are we a nation? Are we going to deal realistically with other nations? Are we going to do this kind of George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton stuff of spreading democracy and intervening around the world? He's brought a new existential quality to the presidential campaign, and that's very exciting to me. That's very exciting to a lot of other people. I think that should be very exciting to people who aren't white as well.
But Richard, here's a guy who also has been very clear about retweeting a lot of information from white supremacists. In the New York Times article, there are many folks who in that article who talked about it and who said, oh yeah, absolutely, sure. He said, I disavow, but the bottom line is he did it as soft as possible. Donald Trump, according to his critics, is pushing the buttons of white supremacists and white nationalists with his language.
I think you're missing something there. The fact is, no one is a white supremacist. I don't know anyone who would identify with that term. I've never met anyone who wants to have supreme lordship over other races or engage in slavery.
Richard, is David Duke one of those people?
No, I've met David Duke. He's not a white supremacist. No.
Are you serious? Wait a minute. A former Klan leader, not a white supremacist?
I think we're having a semantic problem here.
No, we're not. We're actually saying a white supremacist believe that whites are superior to anybody else. David Duke has said that repeatedly, over and over and over again.
Well, I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for others. We do not believe that.
Okay, so that's one place I got to interject. He claims he met David Duke. David Duke has on multiple occasions said that the white race, quote unquote, is superior to all other races. So this is an example of jumping away from a topic that you're going to lose on.
Whites are superior to everyone else, and they should lord over everyone else. We believe that white people are unique. We have a heritage that is traced back to Europe. We are a distinct people that has had an historical experience. We're a distinct people that has certain myths, a certain worldview, and genetics is certainly a strong aspect of that. We are identitarians in the same way that I think you are an identitarian for black people. Your black identity, your African identity, your African heritage is something that is extremely important to you. It's more important than some little, tax policy or foreign policy. It's the most vital, essential thing in your life. That's what it is for me. That's what it is for tons of other people who are identitarians or are part of the alt-right. In terms of Donald Trump retweeting white supremacists, if you call it, he's not retweeting white supremacists, he's retweeting the alt-right or identitarians. The fact is, we have a movement that puts out great material, and he's retweeting good material. That's what's going on.
So let me ask you this question. So when you look at what's happening in America, when you look at power, when you look at income, when you look at who holds position of power, white folks have had it pretty good in America. What are whites scared of? When I read these pieces and I hear whites scared of this demographic shift, when I hear folks say, how tough it's been for white men economically in the past 20 years, it's a lot things have been pretty good for white folks in America for a long time.
Yes, this has been a white country. America has been a white country that has a white ruling class. That's changed dramatically. I think what so many white people view is that we are going to become a minority in this country by, say, 2040 or 2050. If you look at what's going on not in communities that aren't very wealthy amongst white people, there's a tremendous amount of pain. There's a tremendous amount of breakups of families, of drug use, and so on. Whites view realistically what's happening to their world. We are losing power. We are losing our country. You can't claim on the one hand that America was a white nation and then claim that what are you worried about?
You say we're losing our country. How is it your country?
America was created by Europeans. It was the first Immigration Act of 1790, basically restricted immigration to white people. White people have predominated. We've informed the culture. We've informed political institutions. Our political institutions are effectively European political institutions. America was a white country. Whether it's going to be that in the future, I'm not so sure.
So when you say America was a white country, the reality is, but America has had other folks in the country who those same whites have oppressed. Whether you talk about Native Americans, whether you talk about enslaving of black folks as well. And so while whites like yourself enjoyed the fruits of that labor, it was labor that was free, labor that was stolen, labor that was abused. And so when you talk about switching from that country, well, maybe it's called, you know what? We helped build it. We actually built it. So you're going to have to share it. So why are white folks afraid when the reality is people of color have been here and you're going to have to learn how to share power? Why does that make whites afraid when you had a pretty good run for a long time and it's not like you're going away in the next couple of years?
Why is this good? Why would anyone want that? Most people want countries that are defined by their race or even their ethnicity or their linguistic group. That's what we want.
Wait a minute. So you're saying, America is a melting pot. So you're saying, why is that bad?
It was a melting pot of Europeans for some time, and Europeans unquestionably melted together to form an American culture. But the fact is, look, you're basically saying our chickens are coming home to roost. I actually might agree with you there. I think slavery was an absolute disaster, morally speaking, and in terms of its implications. The fact is, you can't argue that your chickens are coming home to roost, like it. White people are going to we want a future. We want a future in which we
Richard.
determine our destiny.
No, but Richard, here's the deal. You have a future.
Sharing.
Here's the deal.
Do you want to share Africa with Europeans?
No, here's the first
Do
of
the
all,
Japanese want to share
Richard,
Japan with the Chinese
Richard,
or with
guess what?
Germans?
Richard, Africans have had to share. You forget, Europeans control Africa up until many of those countries gained their independence in the late 50s and 60s. So guess what?
Exactly.
Africa has been shared by Europeans.
Freedom.
But here's the piece here, and this is what's important. Without black folks, you don't have an America. Without slavery, you don't even have an income system. Without slavery, the 13 colonies dies economically. So I would say you should be saying to African Americans, I'm sure glad y'all were here. America does not become an economic superpower without black folks.
I don't agree with you with that historical claim in the slightest bit. I wish we never had slavery. I think slavery is a wound in this nation, and
Richard.
I do not think it made us an economic superpower at all.
Richard, without cotton,
slavery.
Richard, America controlled 91% of the cotton that was bought in the world. Read the book King Cotton. Who supplied that cotton? Cheap, free labor from slaves. So Richard, you don't have money without slavery. You're a broke nation.
No, slave masters undoubtedly benefited from slavery. That does not mean it's a good thing.
Okay, let me stop there real quick. I guess Roland really didn't have time to give him a lesson on economics. He is correct that America controlled 91% of the entire cotton industry. The cotton was produced here. In order for it to become a product, we did use some of it here as far as the generation of our textile industry. But because the price of cotton was so cheap because of slavery, we were able to export that cotton. Think about the money that is generated through exports. Number one, you have the cotton mills here. Number two, you have transportation of the product, cotton, to ports. Number three, that will generate increased need for shipping. People were making money on shipping. So now you have all of this cotton being shipped. Okay, so that, number one, made money obviously for the people that were growing the cotton. Number two, that made money for people that were transporting the cotton to ports. Number three, that made money for people that helped to build up the ports because of the need for increased capacity. Number four, that increased money that people made via shipbuilding. Okay, and obviously not all the ships that were used to transport the cotton were U.S. ships, but it created an industry, okay, that generated money. Obviously, number five, your banking industry starts getting built up because of the increase in commerce. So that cotton industry basically was the linchpin to expand economic prosperity and economic power within the United States. All right, you have a slight lesson. There's a lot more that goes into that, but we don't have time here.
There are many other countries that became extremely wealthy that did not have African slaves. I mean, in this time, in the late 19th century, Germany was a tremendous power in terms of scientific advancement, industrial advancement.
But they weren't number one.
Slaves. You don't need African slaves to become a superpower. I wish America had taken a different...
He's right. Today, you don't need African slaves to become a superpower. But before the Industrial Revolution actually took hold, this, as well as countries in Europe, were agrarian based. Okay, once the Industrial Revolution occurred, there was a shift. from agrarian to industrial. But the engine that allowed that shift was slavery, okay? Labor. Everything was labor intensive. Now, today, there is very little in industry that is labor intensive. That's what the problem is in our country right now. We've basically taken a lot of industries where you could have gotten a high school education, jumped into various industries, and made a comfortable living that would have placed you in the middle class. Because of the globalization and industrialization of this world, and because of cheap labor in other countries, and you theoretically, based on the wages that they're earning, you could call that legalized slavery. Industries and jobs have flowed into those countries, which have led to unemployment or employment for wages that we aren't used to, and wages that we call non-living wages. You know, and that's what a lot of the argument is today, that when people work, they need to be paid a living wage. So, becoming an economic power today would not be based primarily on slavery, except in countries like, you know, let's say Vietnam. Well, you know, any country, I guess, in Southeast Asia, where they're, you know, paying, you know, cents on the dollar.
Route, and we've never done this terrible thing, which is the enslavement of Africans.
Well, here's the deal, Richard. Here's the reality. Okay? We ain't going anywhere. Now, here's the piece. And just like white nationalists and white supremacists have been saying, you're more than welcome to go back to Europe. You're more than welcome to go back. But I'm going to tell you right now, African Americans, we're not going anywhere. We built this country. We're going to benefit from this country. Latinos, not going anywhere. So, Richard, you're going to have to learn how to scoot over and share the country, because guess what? We ain't turning back.
Do you think that we can reach some common ground in the sense that mass immigration does not benefit whites, and it certainly does not benefit African Americans?
Actually, I can tell you this, Richard. White folks were immigrants. That was mass immigration. That benefited white Americans pretty good, didn't it?
It's not the same people coming over now. We don't have waves of Italians, waves of Germans coming in.
Did those white early settlers, did they immigrate to America? Were they immigrants?
Some of them were frontiersmen. Some of them were settlers.
No, Richard.
Undoubtedly, there were some immigrants,
Richard,
yes.
Didn't those white folks get on a boat and leave somewhere else to come here? They were not born in America.
It's a non sequitur. It's just a non sequitur.
Here's what I'm
just
saying,
because
Richard.
there were immigrants in the past doesn't mean that we want immigrants in the future. Secondly, the immigrants that are coming now are predominantly Hispanic. They're actually predominantly Mexican. It's a different population who bring.
Okay, let's kind of clean this up a little bit. There is a very large Hispanic, let us call it, immigrant population, and let's further classify, because where he's going is illegal immigrant population. Excuse me. But the group that these guys don't seem to be paying attention to are Asians. The Asians are immigrating to this country in huge numbers, but they are flying under the radar, okay? 60% of the people that immigrate to this country, legally or illegally, do not come across the Mexican border. They come by boat, and they come by plane. They are coming from Europe, but they're primarily coming in from Asia. Yes, possibly the single largest group may have been Mexicans, but I believe that is no longer the case. Whether you want to believe statistics or not, we at this point appear to have an immigration problem coming across the Mexican border. That means that just as many people that are coming across the border into the United States, there are just as many people that are going back across that border into Mexico. Why is that? Because the Mexican economy has improved substantially. There are now good paying jobs in Mexico if you are educated. Jobs in agriculture, not all that much, but the number one growing job right now in Mexico is in the oil industry. Mexico has huge oil reserves, and even Americans are going across that border to try to get those jobs. So, you know, we always talk about illegal immigration, and we put a face of a Mexican person on it, but that is not in fact true.
A different culture, a different worldview.
Yeah,
so
and
there's
guess
no
what?
reason why something happens in the past. It's like something happens in the 18th or 19th century, and then you conclude, therefore, all of this would happen.
Richard.
It doesn't happen that way. There's no historical guilt that we have to expiate or something.
Got a question.
It's just like we have to look at this going forward.
I tell you this here, Richard.
Beneficial to whites or blacks.
I tell you this, Richard. Without those other cultures, you don't have an America. Without the other cultures of food and music and dance and all of that, you don't have any of that. And so again, whites are gonna have to learn how to share some power. I know it's tough. I know it's hard for a lot of white folks right now. But trust me, y'all have had a really good run, and it's being good for you. What you got to share right now. I think for you to come on TV1, Richard.
It's going to be amazing once we get beyond thinking that we have to share things. With
No, you got to share.
Believe me.
You got to share. You got to share. It's all good.
That's not really what we're into. We don't.
Richard, you might not be into.
We like to triumph. We like greatness. Sharing. That's losers.
Well, guess what? Guess what, Richard? You better start practicing. Because it's going to happen.
Are we going to go to space? Are we going to?
Yeah, we will.
Explore the world through.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. Because I tell you right now, Richard, if something ever happens with your heart, you better thank Charles Drew, a black man, when it comes to blood plasma. So trust me. Guess what, Richard? There were people of African descent who were inventing things long before white folks existed in Europe. Because if you do your DNA, it actually traces back to the motherland. So it's all good, Richard. It's going to be good for white folks, too. I appreciate you coming on. We'll have you back. Folks, when we come back.
All right, so I thought that was a pretty informative. Richard did mention one thing: there's no historic guilt. That in itself is not true. All right, and history does play a role in where we are today. One of the main ways that wealth is transferred historically is through inheritance. It might surprise you to know that in the South, after 1865, obviously, the Civil War, there were laws created that black people could not pass down to their children an inheritance. Now, don't take my word for it. You can look it up and you can find it. So when a black person who was a landowner, and there were black landowners after 1865, obviously, landowners, business owners, etc., that person was not allowed to transfer their assets down to their children by law. And when they died, those assets were lost. Whereas for white people, they were allowed to transfer their assets down to their children via wills. So that was just another way of holding black people down. Because if you think about it, if a black person had a house and a farm, and they were able to work that farm and live in that house, and if they had been able to pass that farm down to their children, the house down to their children, etc., the children would have had a base to grow on. That wasn't allowed to them. Things like money in bank accounts that were used, once that black person died, if they weren't smart enough or realized what the laws were to take that money out and to just give it to their children, that money was lost. And even a lot of times when they did take that money out and distribute it amongst their children, the white power system basically tried to chase the children down because they were aware of where that money was going, and they wanted to make the children accountable for the monies that they received. And if they couldn't account for it through labor, that money was taken from them. So it's just some facts. Don't take my word for it. Look them up for yourself. Anyway, I thought that this was, this was basically worth my time as far as getting it out there to people of all colors. But this is an example of a person who says he does not want to share. And I'm assuming he's not a Christian, because it's my understanding from my various readings that sharing is Christian. Now, I could be wrong, okay, but that's just basically my understanding, that sharing and helping people is part of the Christian doctrine.